The Redmi Note 10 Pro, also known as the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max in India, is a relatively inexpensive phone, but even so, it brings premium looks and features to the table. Actually, the only things about the Redmi Note 10 Pro that shout mid-ranger are the chipset and the low-light camera performance, even though the starting price is just €250. But hold on a second, let's first talk about the build. The Note 10 Pro is made from curved glass on the back, with a glossy gradient finish. I like the looks of the symmetrical camera bump too. Even though the phone has a plastic frame, it doesn't seem cheap, and the tapered edge makes the whole device feel thin and easy to handle. On top of that, the Note 10 Pro has IP53 rated dust and splash protection, something you don't normally see in phones of this class. The real exciting part comes when you flip over to the front. Just like you'd find on an expensive flagship, the Note 10 Pro has a 6.67-inch OLED display with a fast 120Hz refresh rate, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and a 1080p resolution. High refresh rate screens in this class are usually LCDs, so here you get the advantage of OLED technology with its deep, contrasty blacks. Interacting with this screen feels fluid and responsive, not only because of the fast refresh rate, but also the fast 240Hz touch sampling rate. Since it's an OLED, you can save power by running things in dark mode. And the refresh rate is adaptive. It'll dial down to 60Hz when you're not interacting with the screen to save even more energy. This display looks great too. The punch hole for the selfie cam is quite small and unobtrusive, and colors can either pop or be made to be super accurate, depending on your color settings. On the audio side of things, the Redmi Note 10 Pro has a pair of dedicated stereo speakers. Their output is well balanced, and they scored very good in our loudness test. Mids and highs sound decent enough, but bass is lacking here. There's also a 3.5mm jack for plugging in traditional headphones, as well as support for FM radio. Waking up and unlocking the Redmi Note 10 Pro is done with a side-mounted fingerprint reader built into the power button. It's quite fast and accurate. And you get 64 or 128 gigs of storage on the device, which is expandable via a dedicated microSD slot. The interface of the Note 10 Pro is Xiaomi's MIUI 12 over Android 11. But even though it is running on top of the new Android, this is still the familiar MIUI 12 interface we've seen on Xiaomi's recent phones. You have the option for an app drawer, which can organize your apps into categories. Or you can opt to keep all of your apps on the home screen. And you can also choose between a traditional notification shade or split between a notification center and a control center. There is support for an always-on display, which has plenty of customization options. You can even make the phone glow at the edges when a new notification comes in. And there's an IR blaster too, which allows you to use the phone as a remote to control certain appliances with. At the heart of the Redmi Note 10 Pro is a Snapdragon 732G chipset, built on an 8nm process. I'll start off by saying that this isn't the highest tier of mid-range chip, and there's no support for 5G network connectivity. And since there isn't a flagship-grade GPU, high frame rate gaming isn't really supported. But even so, the Redmi Note 10 Pro holds its own and does a nice job performance-wise for its class. Regular gaming feels good, and the MIUI interface is as smooth as butter. The whole device is powered by a large 5020 mAh battery, and battery life is excellent here. It's slightly less than last year's model, perhaps due to the high refresh rate. But still, with the screen set to 120Hz, the Redmi Note 10 Pro earned an endurance rating of 114 hours in our tests. You get support for 30W fast charging, and a 33W charger comes in the box. With it, we were able to charge the Redmi Note 10 Pro from a dead battery to 50% in half an hour. Now finally onto the cameras. The Note 10 Pro has a quad camera setup, with a high-res 108MP main camera, an 8MP ultra-wide cam, a 5MP tele-macro camera with autofocus, and a depth sensor. The main camera outputs 12MP photos, and these are not just outstanding for this class, but could even be considered flagship level. There's abundant detail with great looking foliage, low noise, and true-to-life colors. The dynamic range is excellent, and yet not over the top. Our only nitpick is that some areas look a bit over-sharpened. Portrait shots are taken with the main cam and the depth sensor. The quality here is quite nice, though the subject separation, while proficient, isn't perfect at times. Since there's no telephoto cam, zoom is done digitally, and you'll end up with a photo which is soft and lacking in detail due to the upscaling. 8-megapixel ultra-wide photos come out quite good. They are pretty rich in detail, with accurate colors, low enough noise, proficient distortion correction, and okay dynamic range. The 5-megapixel telemacro camera is used to take close-up shots, and these are detailed, with lively colors. Plus, having autofocus means getting a sharp result is relatively painless. The contrast and noise levels aren't very impressive though. In low light, the main camera suffers from not having optical stabilization. While you get bright photos with preserved colors, these are quite noisy due to the high ISO, and around half of your shots will come out blurry or out of focus. However, the night mode turns things around. It takes around 2 seconds to process, and it cleans up noise, restores some blown highlights, and exposes a bit more detail in shadows. Plus, we got fewer blurry photos. Ultra-wide shots taken at night are usable, but not very good. The detail and color retention are enough, but the exposure is often dark, and there's plenty of noise. There's no night mode available here. Selfies are taken with the 16-megapixel front-facing cam, which has fixed focus. These have enough detail, with nice colors and excellent contrast. Videos can be taken in up to 4K at 30 FPS with the main camera. This footage is great, with plenty of detail, low noise, and excellent sharpness, colors, and contrast. The ultra-wide cam can only shoot in up to 1080p at 30 FPS. The quality is outstanding though, with rich detail and excellent colors, contrast, and dynamic range, as well as low noise. So that's the Redmi Note 10 Pro. For a pretty reasonable price, you get some great features, like that 120Hz AMOLED display, an elegant and splash-proof build, excellent battery life, stereo speakers, and standout daytime photography and video recording. Like I mentioned earlier, the only real corners cut here are with the mid-range chipset and that mediocre camera performance in low light. But the chipset is still competitive for the class, and it's just hard to get that nice low-light processing outside of a true flagship. Overall, the Redmi Note 10 Pro is one of the best deals we've seen so far this year,